What Pac-12 fans have been waiting for. We saw it Saturday in Columbus. Biggest win for Oregon football since. Biggest win for the Pac-12 since. I think both of those answers are pretty much the same answer. We got Ryan Winter on the line from Sports Chat 503. And, of course, Mike Black from Fifth Quarter College Football, talking Oregon football right here on Ducks Live here at the Voice of College Football. So leave those comments, those questions, those debate topics in the live chat, and we will get to you. Dare I ask, do I need to ask how you guys are doing?
Doing wonderful.
Feeling good, Mark. Feeling good. Well, I'll just jump in here. It's just being the long-standing elder statement of the group here. This is something we've been building on for a long time. Been waiting to see it. I was that guy. I sent out a tweet to Mike saying, "Hey, I apologize for possibly thinking the Ducks couldn't do it or couldn't get it done." I was one of those wait and see guys. I hadn't seen it yet, and so especially against Ohio State, hadn't seen it yet, and so I was surprised, but at the same time, I was also not surprised with what we've seen in their practice and what we've heard from this program over the last couple of years, that the level of recruiting has gone up so much that now we can compete as a team. The Ducks can compete on the level of Ohio State, and they went out and showed it, man.
Mike, you get to talk.
Yeah, I was making sure. But no, man, I thought it was great. I thought one thing that was really big for this win is with, obviously Saban's been coaching a long time. A lot of coaches seem to be on the hot seat, like coaches at LSU. Clay Helton just got fired. I feel like this is just another reason to help keep Mario Cristobal. It was a huge win, and it proves that he can win here. Like, now he's like, all right, I can win here. It was just another huge block to keep this program going in the same trajectory it is. And that's probably our biggest win since that Florida State game.
I agree.
I would say the Pac-12's biggest win since UCLA beat LSU, though, because that was pretty big for the Pac-12 in notoriety when it comes to nationwide perception, at least from what I've seen.
Do you think that the LSU game was
not bigger than this? Not
this
bigger than
game?
this. Bigger than the Florida State game.
Yeah, see, to me,
because of how long it's been, I thought this game is bigger for the Pac-12 than the Florida State-Oregon game.
I think it ranks a little differently. I think the Florida State game was so important because of where it stood in the history books of that first college football playoff, that first 14 playoff, being at the Rose Bowl and not having it be the last game of the season for the winning team. This is stuff we'd never even seen before. And that game, the Ducks showed up so masterfully. It kind of got, overshadowed a little bit a week later when, Ohio State goes through with Ezekiel Elliott in the fourth quarter. You can't stop them, and they win by 20. So looking back on that was a win we didn't really get to celebrate for a full year like we would normally. And I think that takes a little of the shine off of that win. But I would agree, this is the biggest win since that. And going back into Oregon's history, I think this is one of the biggest wins, if not the biggest win of them all.
I'd put it right behind the pick.
The pick as a play, yes. But being a guy who was in that stadium when that happened, I was a junior in high school when that happened. That was a year that, that Rose Bowl was something we never thought we'd go back to. So a regular season game against a conference opponent at that point was the biggest game. I think moving past that, I think the Joey Harrington era Colorado win in the Fiesta Bowl was a big one. I think going over that, I think going back to a conference win was the USC game on Halloween night. I think those are all games that kind of stepped the forward progress of the program up. And you got to a point where it felt like after that Auburn loss with Chip Kelly against Cam Newton, that where else could you go but up? And you're only going to take a step back. We took a couple steps back there and got back to the national championship and took a major step back. And so this, by the fact that this is against Ohio State, the team that beat us in the national championship, that really took us off that peg, to get back to that is tremendous. I mean, I can't say it enough how good it feels to be an Oregon Duck fan right now this week.
We're not going to truly know how big the win was for years to come, and most notably, at least till the end of this season. Of course, if Oregon doesn't fulfill its promise, doesn't run through the Pac-12, then obviously the importance of the game loses some luster.
I agree.
I think we can afford a game though. We can no chance in anything we can afford to. I think we can afford a game as long as it's to like say it's to UCLA and we avenge that loss in the Pac-12 championship. Similarly to 2014, we had that big non-conference win. We lost Arizona. We beat Arizona in the Pac-12 championship. I think we could afford one, but it can't be to like a Oregon State though.
Yeah, I actually think that anybody out of the Pac-12 that's going to get to that 14 playoffs got to run the table. I feel like there's the deck stacked against the league. Although this does do a huge bit to help with that. I think to Mike's point earlier, that UCLA game helps a lot too, just because of LSU being where they've been in the last 3-4 years. Now, they're not the team that they were, granted, and coming off that hurricane, they weren't in a great spot, but you got to win these non-conference games. And I think Colorado beating Texas A&M would have been another huge step. You know, they played them tough, but you know, until you start getting these W's as a Pac-12, I think the rest of the country has something to say about the conference being a little bit weaker. And the Pac-12 needed Oregon to win this game so bad.
If Washington wasn't so abysmal, it would have been better for us too. Washington was what we all expected.
Well, the way it stacks up right now, and I'm going to produce a video because I ran all the numbers on the Power 5 conferences through 2 weekends against each other, and it's not even close. The Pac-12 numbers are the worst. They are just the worst top to bottom. But the saving grace is to win the 2 that are the most important, and especially the 1 that is the most important. Sure, it'd be great if Colorado beat Texas A&M, but Colorado's not going to do anything substantial. If Utah would have beat BYU. And these other games, yes, for compiling the numbers and the records are good in the narrative across the board. But in terms of trying to push that one school, that one team, which Oregon is obviously that team right now, to the top, to the elite, that was the game to win. And the Pac-12 got it done. Oregon got it done, I should say, in representing the Pac-12. So regardless of, and right now the Big 10 otherwise is playing extremely well outside the conference, still has some big non-conference games. The Big 10 could be evaluated, as it probably will be, to be a better conference top to bottom than the Pac-12, but this could turn out to be a tiebreaker. If you've got 2 11-1 teams, Ohio State and Oregon, regardless of what anybody thinks, you have to give Oregon that playoff spot.
Especially considering how Oregon won that game. I know the final score was a touchdown, but Ohio State, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't have a lead the entire game, and Oregon controlled the trenches. That it never, you know, there were times where it's like, okay, is Ohio State about to come back here? But there was never times where the game was completely like, oh, okay, Ohio State's about to win this game. Like we had control of the game for the entire game, and that's not just a win. I think that is huge.
I think going toward the model that everybody's looking for, that 14 playoff, and every game is set up for that. That now they're in the driver's seat. You know, you just got to win out, and you're there. I do think that this is an absolutely humongous game for the Pac-12. But you're right, Mark. I mean, the top end of the Pac-12 is fairly decent, but the bottom half of it is not. And they didn't show up in the games they needed to show up in. You're right. Another thing about Colorado or Utah, they might not be going to that national championship game, but we just need every single Pac-12 team to start winning, just to stack up as many teams as we can in the top 25. So we have top 25 matchups to get those records to go up as much as possible, because we do actually have also that extra game that we're going to count one more loss against every other, or at least half the Pac-12 is going to get one more loss because we play that one extra non-conference game comparatively to other conferences. So, you know, this is a big deal. You know, I look at it through the lens of what if it comes down to the wire and Clemson and Oregon are in the same boat, you're going to look to this game. This is the game that's going to be the separator and compare it to the Georgia game. And I think Oregon has a better win than Clemson would have on their schedule. But if Oregon were to lose a Pac-12 game, then they would have the worst loss of those two. So it's a dicey situation.
Well, if they lose to that UCLA team and they still win out, it's still not a terrible loss.
True. If it is to UCLA, but if Utah tacks on another couple losses and you lose up there late or whatever the case may be, I'm hoping for the fact that Oregon at this point is in the position they're looking to be for the last 2 or 3 years with the recruiting classes. We've been talking about this point right now in the schedule. This game, if you win it, this could be a trajectory wise a huge deal for the Ducks. And if they're able to just hold on and win out, I think they're right there at the end. Now, their gift at the end, if they do win out, might be to play Bama in the first round, which wouldn't be great. But it is what it is. The Pac-12 needs a representative
If we
in
win
that
out, we
14
won't play
playoff.
Bama.
We just need it.
If we win out, we won't play Bama. We'll play the 3 or 2.
You're
seed,
right.
whichever one
You're
we get.
probably right. They'd probably slide into the 3 spot. Yep, or the 2, maybe even the 2 spot if crazy other things happen.
Now,
But
if we lose that UCLA game, then we go get to play Bama.
or you're on the first wave out and you go back to the Rose Bowl. Yeah, either way, it's going to be a hell of a year. This has proved a lot for, like you said, I think it's going to keep Cristobal in town. It proved the fact that their culture has shifted. They controlled the line of scrimmage on both sides. I was very impressed with the Oregon defensive line. I thought that was going to be a tough matchup against what I thought was a superior offensive line at Ohio State. But the ball bounced the way they needed to. It was not a fluke win at all. Like you said, the Ducks were up the entire game without their top starting 2 defensive players on the road. Everybody knew what was happening in this game. Everybody had scheduled this game and circled it for months and months and months. And when they played it out, that first TD drive was a 99-yard drive. I heard guys in the post game, Buckeye fans in post game saying, if you let a team go 99 yards, you don't deserve to win. Well, they did that on the first touchdown drive. So that says a lot about the Oregon Ducks right now. And I would have to say another topic of discussion is people are pretty happy with Anthony Brown right now.
Yeah. Speaking of which,
Go, Mike.
Speaking of which, I need to issue a formal apology to Anthony Brown. I did not think he had the ability to perform as well as he did, and I did not think he was going to be as poised in the pocket. And one thing I really want to highlight is his pocket presence and his movement in the pocket is some of the most beautiful I have ever seen at Oregon. We've had some better quarterbacks, obviously, but he might have the best pocket presence of any of the quarterbacks besides maybe Vernon Adams.
Well, guys played a lot of football.
Yeah, and he's got beautiful pocket presence. He balled out, and I couldn't have been more wrong about him. I thought it would be tough. I thought it would have to completely rely on our defense to win that game in Columbus. Now, our defense did a fair share of the work, but Anthony Brown played well when he needed to. He made the right decisions. He dropped his shoulder on Ohio State's safety, converted that first down. That was one of the huge plays. Brown played great, and I could not have been more wrong about him. He's a quality quarterback, and he should be able to do great things for us this year, especially if he keeps playing like he did this week.
Yeah, I really agree with that, and I know you were a little hard on him early, but you know it is what it is. You got to get out and say your piece, you know, and don't be afraid of that. But you know, I do think this guy's just seen a lot of football. He's very calm. He's very collected. The moment never got too big. The stadium was not overwhelming. He came out right out of the gate and was just very cool. And I think that goes a long way for that offensive side. I think that nobody asked him to go out and win it on his own. He didn't try to do too much. He didn't try to go for any home run balls. I thought he just played an absolutely perfect game. From his perspective, at his talent level with the group that he has, I think he played a damn near perfect game.
It was a game that I certainly felt as though Oregon had a really good shot. I'm not going to try to proclaim anything that I didn't say because I picked Ohio State to win the game. I immediately jumped on 14.5 points on the Oregon side. I thought that was ridiculous. And I did say a number of times over the last week that I felt as though Oregon had about a 40% chance of winning the game. If I had to reassess the teams and they played again, I don't know. I tend to be stubborn about these things and still feel as whatever my original conclusion was, is that let's say Ohio State is the better team, that they're still the better team, but they played a game and that's all that matters. And Oregon, in addition to winning the game, and again, this could play into the way the College Football Playoff Selection Committee looks at these things. If they play out all these factors the way they tell us they do, no Kayvon Thibodeau, no Justin Flo, no 5 key defenders on the road.
I think it should be noted that
really
Flo
the
was
only thing you could
backup.
say about Ohio State is there has to be a judgment made and about Oregon from game 2 all the way through the end of the season in regards to how the two teams progress from there. But that's a judgment call. The things that I stated are facts that Oregon was able to overcome.
I think it's been kind of ignored that, not to mention Flo was out, but on top of that, Flo wasn't the starter in the first place. Drew Mathis was a starter. Drew Mathis got hurt. Then Flo stepped in. Flo played really well. Then Flo got hurt. So we were on our third linebacker, a middle linebacker, and he was a freshman who played a lot of the snaps.
And I mean, talk about some crazy stuff. I mean, we had one of the tight end, D.D. Johnson. He came out and had a phenomenal game, offensively, making great blocks, having catches or whatever. He went to the defensive side at the end, got the last sack of the game. I mean, this is a guy who played on the defensive side at Miami, played at the defensive side first year at Oregon, switches to the tight end spot. In my mind, he was the offensive MVP of the team last year. He was tremendous. And then this year comes in a little bit late to camp. Still doing great offensively. They say, we need you over there. We're so thin on the defensive side. He switches over and goes both ways. I mean, there were some crazy things that happened in this game. I do think, though, the Oregon defense is something that now we can actually legitimize. It's proven. The blueprint's there. They've switched out the defensive coordinators. The talent level's there. They're playing good defense. They're playing solid defense. Yes, they'll get burned sometimes, but they're playing solid defense. That was always the question mark early. That looks like Ohio State's biggest problem right now. When I look at the boards and the message board, they say that the defense failed us. So Oregon having a good defense sets them up to be competitive on the elite level. We were worried about their offense, and Oregon's offense showed up beautifully. So I would agree with you, Mark. I mean, I didn't think it was going to happen either. And I'm maybe a little stubborn on this theory too. If they played 10 times in a row, do you think it would be 50-50 or do you think it would be 60-40? I mean, nobody's winning 10 out of these matchups.
I think if they played 10 times, Oregon wins a majority of them. I wouldn't have said that before the game, but after watching the game and how Oregon dominated in the trenches, if it was accidental, it wouldn't have happened all 4 quarters and seemingly every drive. Like,
good point.
There were a few plays where Ohio State got the advantage, but that was one player getting the advantage. Their entire front 7 never fully got the advantage of Oregon. And I just, trenches are huge when it comes to the game of football. They may not get the praise, but if you're losing the trenches like that, there's no way I think you win more than 4 out of the 10 of the matchups.
I would agree with that. And we saw this on tape with the Minnesota game. They were able to run on Ohio State. And so Oregon looked at as a blueprint. But there again, I still thought that Ohio State's defense would put enough pressure on at some point in time with their pass rushers to make a difference in this game. They never did. Anthony Brown was clean the whole game.
Yeah, so did I, especially because their struggles with Minnesota seemed to be out of the 13 personnel, which is the bunch package, and Oregon didn't run that and still had success.
Right. Yeah. I would also say another thing about the Oregon defense. Oregon defense became very flexible as well. Not only were you bringing offensive guys over to play defense, but they were bringing safeties up to play linebacker half the time too. So just a very creative defense. Very, very impressed with how they played on that side of the ball.
Yeah, Ohio State defensively, it's no surprise watching them play last year that the secondary struggled and the entire linebacking core is new. Right. Ohio State fans were not happy with the previous linebackers, but 2 of the 3 got drafted in the NFL fairly high. So that's kind of the standard at Ohio State. They're unhappy with players, and they turned out to be 2nd and 3rd round NFL draft selections, and that was their linebacking core. And they thought that they were going to be so much more athletic, but so much less experienced. This linebacking core is elite athletically, if you believe in recruiting rankings, but they're so inexperienced. The whole defense is inexperienced, excluding like 3 players. Ohio State also was missing its best safety, the guy that pretty much runs the defense, gets everybody in the right spot, and he's probably going to be out the rest of the season, Josh Proctor. So that was a huge loss. Pardon me?
He tried to play in that game, right? And then I think Anthony Brown took him out.
Yes, he started the game, and he had injury issues before that.
And the corners were also dinged in the first week, right? They tried to go. They didn't look. They looked hobbled as well for Ohio State. So Ohio State had injuries on their side of the ball too, big time.
Yeah, and the thing that people need to understand from an Ohio State perspective, and of course this is an Oregon show, but so we'll lay off the Buckeyes here in a second. They got 3 5-star defensive linemen. You would think that they wouldn't have issues with the pass rush, and that defensive line could later this season or next season be devastating. But 2 of those 3 guys are true freshmen, so they're playing in their 2nd collegiate game. One of them just stepped on campus about a month ago, so it's going to take some time.
Yeah, and I was
with a lot of that.
impressed on that note of both sides of the ball playing a lot of true freshmen and making impacts. I mean, that's what you get when you get these high recruit classes too, because these kids aren't going to come unless they're going to get some playing time. And I was very impressed. Oregon had numerous players on both sides of the ball as true freshmen playing and making impacts. The tight ends for Oregon, two of their tight ends played a lot, especially when Cam McCormick went out very early. So I was very impressed. Keith Brown as well on the defensive side, true freshman stepping in and starting the game. So I was thoroughly impressed with the youth of both these teams.
Yeah, I do want to make one more note about defensive line for both teams. For one, Mark, you remember I was in here. I thought Zach Harrison was a monster, and I wasn't as impressed as I thought I was going to be coming out of that game. He went up against a lot of the time Stephen Jones, who in week one was struggling, and last year had a lot of signs of struggle. And Stephen Jones was, for a better part of that game, pretty much manhandling him for a while. And that was shocking to me. And to top that off, to keep on with the defensive line, what we thought was going to be the weakness of this Oregon team coming into the year with interior defensive line might just be one of the strengths of this team. They've played so well in these first 2 weeks, stopping Fresno State's running back, whose name is somehow slipping my head. And then they just came over here and stopped Ohio State's run fairly well, at least as much as you're going to be able to with that team. And I'm so impressed by that interior defensive line, and they've showed out.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say Popo and Brandon both have played great up front. The other guys have rotated through as well, but very, very, very impressed with Popo Mabai and Brandon Dorless.
So Ohio State threw a 54 and they ran a 26 with their running backs, and a lot of people complained that they got away from the run. So there are two running backs, Mayan Williams, extremely highly rated back, who only had 10 carries last year, and then they bring in Travion Henderson, who was the number one rated running back in the nation. What was astonishing to me was that when Oregon defenders, not just one guy, multiple guys, it seemed like every one of them was able to tackle them in space. When the Ohio State offensive line opened a hole and it looked like it was going to be a big play, it turned out to be a 4-yard run instead of a 14-yard run because somebody closed for Oregon and they made the tackle, and they didn't let somebody drag them for 4 yards. They stopped them cold. Stalemated those ball carriers.
Noah Sewell and Jamal Hill were absolutely all over the field. They were there. If you guys had a guy who looked like it was about to break off a big play, I was seeing number one, like the guy's on the ground and the guy who tackled him is wearing number one on the back of his jersey. Or it's Jamal Hill, who didn't play last week. It was, man, I love having Jamal Hill back. He's so versatile at safety. He's a safety, but don't underestimate it. He's strong enough to play linebacker.
Well, and DJ James made huge plays on the corner, and I think Bennett Williams had another great game as well. A guy who's just fired up, comes run downhill, defensive players. Now, I would also say a lot of this has to go to the strength and conditioning staff. I think Oregon historically did not have the same type of ideology of strength and conditioning that we shared around the country. I feel like there was a much more of a different approach with Jim Radcliffe. Coming in with Coach Feld, it is all systems go. It is pushing plates, and it is, you can see the results on the field, not only in the trenches, but also on the outside. Oregon's offensive whole scheme needs to have everybody block to make it work. Tight ends, wide receivers, we're absolutely locking up these blocks. And then defensively, these corners and safeties are really coming to hit, and they're really coming to tackle. Like you said, my form tackling was great. And I really am impressed with the fact of having so many defensive players out and being able to adapt and be able to be flexible and put a lot of guys in positions to be successful. And I thought Bennett Williams was great. The way he was crashing down on running plays was phenomenal.
This is the depth that Oregon didn't have the last time they played Ohio State.
Amen.
When Oregon didn't play Ohio State last time, they were down a few players, and it showed. This time, Oregon comes in down a few players, and they have the depth for guys to be able to step up and play football. And it was just great to see. Even Dante Manning, who obviously was a little raw coming into college, he showed a lot of bright spots. He got beat a couple of times. One of them was a drop pass by Olave or Wilson, one of the two. But either way, other than that, Dante Manning played a hell of a game. The inexperience at corner showed, but, man, there's some talent there.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of young players. They're very good. Trequez Bridges also had a great game. There's a lot of names you can keep throwing out, but what I really liked is their flexibility, and I liked how many guys they're rotating in, get a lot of game experience. And again, can't say enough about the offensive line and the defensive line. I think you win most games in the trenches, and historically, Oregon might not have won those battles. And I think that has a lot to do with the strength and conditioning staff as well.
Man, I don't know. We had the players to win those battles. It's just when those guys went down, we couldn't win those battles. Because you always had the Defos, the Buckners, the Nadas.
Sure.
You just behind them was like me and you.
And that's kind of the point. Is, my dad, being a lifelong Duck, he's always said, it's about stacking these recruiting classes up back to back to back. Yes, you would have a class where you maybe have a couple of those guys like we had with DeForest Buckner and Eric Armstead at the same time, or we had in the past with some other great players. But a guy like Helton not only comes around every once in a while, it's to be able to stack a guy up with that similar amount of talent at the same time. To where you're right, you lose a guy like Flo, who had a great game first game, a guy like KT, who's going to be, really early pick in the NFL draft, and it was like you didn't skip a beat.
Before we continue, Mark, is it wrong for me to say I think Noah Sewell might be the most important player to this team?
Oh, hands down, he's the best player on the Hill team.
He's all. I don't know if I go that far.
Oh, I think he could be a running back for this team. I think he could be a short yardage back.
So
I think
versatile.
I think he could be the quarterback if Brown went down. I think he could be the punter. I'm not joking. This is a kid who every single one of his brothers played D1 football. This is the youngest of them all, possibly the most athletic of them all. He's the fastest. He's probably the fastest and the strongest at the same time. I mean, the combination of speed and strength and athleticism and smarts this guy has.
His IQ.
This guy's IQ is off the charts, and he plays hard. He's got
everywhere.
An absolute motor.
He was everywhere against Ohio State, man, and it's so crazy to see like how good that whole family is. Nephi Sewell over at Utah can ball out.
Yes.
Gabriel Sewell at Nevada, he was under recruited and he ended up being the best player Nevada's had in a minute. Like their whole family could form a pretty good 7-on-7 team, probably. Their cousin,
and all
Kingsley
very
Sewell,
humble.
Their cousin, Kingsley Sewell Matautia.
Yeah.
Really solid player. Their other cousin, DJ Uyungale, he struggled, but he's a solid player. Their other cousin, his younger brother, Mataya Uya, that family is just, that bloodline is nuts.
Right. But I think that he personally, Noah Sewell, what he represents to this team is something that is more of a character change than we've seen ever before. And if you could, make your own athlete on a, video game or whatever, those are the characteristics you want. You want a guy that has the incredible motor, absolutely goes through the A gap, blows up the A gap like Kiko Alonso, but can drop back in coverage and have intelligence to pick the right guy. He can make this play. I think the play of the game could have been that fourth down play early, where he got that tackle fourth down. I mean, the whole defense obviously stepped up to make that play, but he's the guy in charge. And I really do think that we talk about freshmen. He was a true freshman that took over as a middle linebacker, making all the calls from the guy before who was the guy. Okay. Isaac's like, who's the guy? And Isaac's like, sure, I'll go to the Will backer. You slide in as a true freshman and start making all the calls. That says a lot.
So I'm going to temper the optimism just a bit to bring in some obvious facts, but at the same time, credit. Mike gives me a smirk there. I play this across the board neutral. I'm just again going to play devil's advocate again to a certain extent. In that, the defense was phenomenal, but more so when it had to be. I do think that Ohio State kind of played into their hands, throwing 54 passes and putting that kind of a load on a freshman quarterback in his second start. Ohio State did gain like 612 yards of total offense, so they had no issues moving the ball. It was exactly what you said, and the reason I'm bringing up this point is, Ryan, you sparked my memory that basically there were, I don't have the numbers in front of me, maybe 2 or 3 fourth down plays where Ohio State discarded the field goal, said we're going to go for it, had just drove down the field with no issues, but Oregon made the play when it counted in the red zone.
Yeah, and some of those plays were from an inexperienced quarterback. A lot of those drives ended with some incomplete passes early. And yeah, I agree. I think you could have kicked field goals early and done what you did. But you know what? This guy Ryan Day is from the Chip Kelly school. These guys don't play around. That fourth down comes in, and they know what they're going to do. The whole team never even flinched. They never even barely looked to the sideline. They knew where they're going for it on fourth. And there were some times where they were successful on fourth. They got that touchdown on a 4th down play, crossing route across the middle. But you're right. I mean, I think at the end of the day, they were going between, the red zones. They didn't have as much success in the red zone. And Mike, you might want to speak on this a little bit, but I felt like when they got to the red zone, they couldn't run the ball and they only tried to throw it. And sometimes those lanes tighten up when you get close to the and we talk about all the time with Chip Kelly, how it was harder to score in the red zone sometimes than it was out of the red zone with those explosive plays.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys were watching the personnel changes and when they were happening. So Ohio State, when they were driving, they would start having success with the inside run. Then Oregon would sub out, bring in their largest defensive lineman. Popo would go out, they bring in Jason Jones. They just stuff that hole, and even if he doesn't get the tackle, by time he breaks off of him, Noah Sewell or Jamal Hill was there. So they would have success, then they would rotate the personnel, get it set for that package, and just stop that. Then they would move on to something else, and it's just, man, it was a great game by both of our coordinators. I was excited to finally see a Joe Moorhead offense at Oregon. We haven't seen offense with that kind of play calling since Mark Helfrich was here. As bad as Mark Helfrich was for the program, he was a great offensive coordinator, great play caller, just couldn't do about anything else. And defensive coordinator wise, he called a really good game. Obviously, we did give up a lot of yardage, but his players were in the right place every time. It's just they got beat. If they were gaining yards, like Dante Manning got beat. Mykael Wright got beat once or twice, I think. He got beat off of that touchdown when he was looking at his play card because they were running that tempo. He had his players in the right spot. Tim DeRuyter called a good game. There was just, the inexperience showed, and that's what caused a lot of the issues with the defense. And obviously being down, 5 players?
Yeah.
So yeah, he called a great game. Joe Moorhead called a great game. And I'm very proud of Mario Cristobal for giving up the offense to Joe Moorhead. He seemed very hesitant to do that.
Yes.
And he seemed very hesitant to push away from the pistol. We still used it some, but it was a lot less than it was in 2020 in week 1. So I was so happy to see that pistol go away.
I would agree with that. Go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say it came down to 3 or 4 plays. The statistics as I look at the box scores reminding me of a few things. One being exactly what we talked about there is that Ohio State routinely drove down the field, but 2 for 5 on 4th down. Mm-hmm. So Oregon made those plays in the red zone, and most of those were around the 10 or 15-yard line in prime scoring territory. Ohio State outgained them by almost 100 yards, 612 to 50, more than 100 yards, 612 to 505. There was only 1 turnover in the game. So Ohio State's defense was completely ineffective trying to create turnovers or negative plays until, ironically, late in the game. I don't think Oregon scored its last 3 possessions, which, of course, the last one, they were just trying to hang on to the ball. But when Ohio State finally showed some type of fight on defense, got a hand at least in Anthony Brown's face, forced some bad throws, and stalemated the run, that was at the same time that Oregon started making some stops on defense. And, of course, there was 1 turnover in the game, and that didn't necessarily win the game for Oregon, but obviously it prevented Ohio State from continuing the drive, possibly tying the game and forcing OT.
Yeah, and there were multiple times where it felt like they were going to break one. It was going to be a tip off the top. I mean, they had said it in the announcers over and over and over that CJ Stroud misses high, and he did early on. They felt like there was going to be a tip. There was going to be something in the air. There was going to be chances for Oregon to get an interception. I said that the whole week leading up to it, months before, that they needed to win the turnover battle to have a chance in this, and ended up being the case. But you're right. They didn't win because of that interception, but it sure as heck helped their cause at the end. I would say that Ohio State looked at the tape, just like Oregon looked at the tape of the Minnesota game. I would say that Ohio State looked at the tape of the Fresno game and said, we're going to pick these guys apart through the air. Oregon gave so much cushion. There was such a zone complex of just giving. I mean, I couldn't tell you how many first downs were right in front of the line and nobody's within 5 yards of the guy. And I thought Ohio State saw that on film and was like, hey, we're going to just take advantage of this. We don't even need the run to win this game. We're going to throw it through the air. We're going to pick these guys apart, and we're going to run when we need to. And it turned out to be almost the case. I think Oregon just stepped up enough with the running game and in key positions at just 1 or 2 plays. You said a couple plays made or break the game. There was an incomplete pass.
So before we get to the question right here, I will say, Mike, what you're saying about the feel of the game, and this was related to the scoreboard, that Oregon was typically up 1 to 2 scores the entire game, that it had a feeling. It felt like Oregon was up by 20 points most of the time. It just felt like they were. Maybe this is the fan in me, or maybe this is just seeing Ohio State basically win 90-some% of its games in the last 10 years, that as long as they stayed within a score, I genuinely thought Ohio State was going to win the game. I thought they're going to figure out a way to win this game, and they will win the game late, and they'll walk off the field knowing that they shouldn't have won the game, but they did. But it just never happened.
I would agree with that. That was going to be like the Auburn game, right? Where it's like Oregon had control of it. They thought they were going to win it. What happened at the last second? All of a sudden, Auburn wins. And I think it probably would have happened that way had they kicked some field goals early, converted on some plays here and there, or maybe not give up that interception. But it is what it is. Oregon will take it any way they can get it.
Absolutely.
At this point, and super proud of it. But I think Ohio State's still got a hell of a year in front of them, and would not be surprised at all to see them run the table, figure things out on defense. And this might be the wake-up call they needed.
Yeah, Ohio State fans tend to bring up a number of scenarios like this that have happened in the past. Some have worked out for them. They've always bounced back, at least looking at the last 10 years, bounced back to become at least a top 5 team in the nation, if not a playoff team. They lost a week 2 game like this against Virginia Tech by 2 touchdowns and then won the national championship. All right, the thing about this Oregon schedule, my goodness, I hate to look ahead like this. It would have to be, of course, the ultimate letdown, the greatest one in college football history, to turn around and then have issues with Stony Brook. So we'll mark that one down, but they're will be a significant favorite in all these games, except for, as Mike says, traveling to the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, I think the Ducks play well down there, though. I like Ducks' chances in LA. I just think that the team loves to play down there. A lot of LA guys on the team. UCLA doesn't have the greatest home field advantage. Obviously, the Rose Bowl is very, very cumbersome stadium. You know, they don't even come close to filling that thing. But I really like Oregon's chances if they can just maintain. Actually, after last week, I'm excited to watch the Stanford game. I think the Stanford game, matchup wise, is going to be the real good on good to me. I just think that Stanford has quality athletes. The way that they want to run their game is somewhat similar to the way that Oregon wants to run their game, as opposed to maybe some of the other spread ideas out there or air raid out there that's going on. But this is a great schedule. I mean, late in the year at Utah is a hell of a game. That's going to be a tough one. I don't care how good Utah is or what their schedule looks like. They're always a quality opponent, and up there is always tough, especially at the end of the year with weather and whatnot. Washington they could lose to every FCS team. They're going to get jacked for this Oregon game at home, especially after last year with COVID, everything else, and maybe even more so after these first 2 losses. Their coach on the hot seat as well. That's always going to be a big game. I like Oregon's chances in a whole lot more than I did 2 weeks ago. But yes, I think the UCLA game, the Stanford game, and the Utah game are going to be the 3 big ones to look out for.
Anything in this schedule, Mike, that I know you like UCLA to win the South, and of course they've shown up the first 2 games of the season, so they in no way have shown that they're not going to be a factor. But I like the way you lay it out, Ryan, because if you just take the rankings and the records and that's all you look at, then you look at this schedule and you think Oregon's going to run the table. But we know from experiencing college football seasons year after year after year, it's typically not the team that you expect. Going to Utah, the second to last game of the season, you know, it could be like 28 degrees and sleeting and nasty, and not that you guys aren't used to that up in the Pacific Northwest.
My thing is, I think we have to play UCLA twice, and it's hard to beat a good team twice.
Good point.
And
although that last game at the end of the year will feel a whole lot different than this one, if they play it the right way in Vegas, all the pomp and circumstance, feel like a bowl game much more. That would feel more like a one-off than feel like just playing the team back again. Even though I get it on tape, playing the team twice, and if you play Chip twice, you know he's going to have something up his sleeve. The guy is a mastermind. He
went back to his old system. That's the scariest thing for me. He's starting to revert back to like the play style he originally used at Oregon. He was trying to prove that he didn't need that at UCLA, And they opened up the season, and it looked like a Chip Kelly team. Maybe a little more pro style, things thrown in there, but it looked way more like a Chip Kelly called offense than it has in previous years. And that's the only part that worries me, because that requires a lot of speed and a lot of crossing routes, a lot of confusion for the defenders. And with the inexperienced defenders, that's the only reason they're my biggest concern.
Oh, absolutely. They run that pick play every single time. I would also say that, their defense was the question mark for me, and their defense has really looked better. This week is going to be a big deal, though, having a common opponent in Fresno State, to see how they play against Fresno State. I tend to think Fresno is going to have a good year this year, and this could be another one of these kind of barometer games for them to kind of see where they stand. UCLA at home, I don't think is that much of an advantage. I think it actually might be an advantage for the Ducks. I think we get loud down there. A lot of LA, a lot of SoCal Ducks. And I think that the Ducks might have a larger presence on that day. But if UCLA continues to win and we both match up at an undefeated level, you know how LA gets. There might be a whole bunch of people that jump on that bandwagon the Friday before that game and show up there. But I really like it. I like the way I like the way the Ducks are playing. I like the defense, and I like the fact that on that matchup, I still think Oregon's the more physical team. I do think that Chip can run power better than Mario can run power, just because Chip's a genius in how he runs his running game. But I think the Ducks have a great shot at running the table from now on out.
If I get a chance to rewatch, or I didn't see it for the first time, so it would be watching a game from last weekend, not because it was a great game, but Stanford, they got whipped by Kansas State. They barely scored. They scored a meaningless touchdown. It looked like, Stanford 2 years ago went 4-8. Maybe the Stanford program's not really in good shape. I was shocked. That was the score that shocked me this weekend. It wasn't as close as the final score. They were up 42-13 in that game in the fourth quarter. To go back and watch that, I got to see how in the world did that happen?
Man, I mean, I think everybody pretty much thought that if he wasn't the best, they thought Keaton Slovis was the second best quarterback in the conference coming into this year. And watching them get absolutely embarrassed by a team full of inexperienced players and transfers is insane. That Stanford team looked really good, but again, they didn't look great week one. So I don't know what to make of them after that game, but that was a fun game to watch, because you gotta love watching USC lose. It helps Oregon stay at where they're at, because as great as the Ducks are, it's not going to be as easy to stay at the top if USC's good again. It'll never be easy if they're good again, but I still think we got to chokehold in the conference.
Yeah, I liken it to, I think USC needs to be good for the conference to get the credibility it deserves, and beating USC when they are highly recruited or highly respected is great, but they get some of the best recruits every year and do the least with it every year. I mean, this is like clockwork. The fact that they fired Clay Helton today, it blows my mind, because this could have happened or should have happened 2 or 3 years ago. And every year they just barely won enough games, or they justified it in some way, shape, or form. And now, after they have this sort of upset win or upset loss against Stanford, they lose. I love the Stanford USC game. Week 2, they have to both play Notre Dame. They have to fit it in their schedule. I think Stanford has a shot every single time because they're more disciplined. They play better brand of football. I think David Shaw's a great coach. I think he's got a great program. These guys get some of the best kids in the entire country. They get 4-point stud athletes, some of the best kids in the school. Going to Stanford, they recruit around the entire country. Stanford is a unique school. Stanford is much more aligned with a Notre Dame than almost anybody else out here, just because of their ability to recruit. They're relevant in every single high school in the country. Not all schools are. They also play a brand of football that really nobody else plays out in the West Coast, except for Oregon now. Oregon has transitioned to becoming much more of a power game. And I think that Oregon just alone have had trouble with Stanford matching up maybe power for power. So they ran around the best games, Oregon, Stanford, in my mind, were the Chip Kelly era at times, when they would just absolutely run them. And they had such speed, it felt like Stanford couldn't hang with it. Now Stanford has increased their speed. They've got some better speed guys, agility guys. But I think this is going to be a great game. I think this could be a closer game than we want to think, this Stanford-Oregon game. I think it's going to be a good one. I think this could be a really good test for Oregon going into their Pac-12 schedule.
Just a little note on Clay Helton. So I've been watching the boards of Nebraska because I thought they were gonna, maybe fire Scott Frost. But it's come up now on Scoop Duck for Oregon, and it's come up on Nebraska's 24/7 Sports board that Dante Williams was, quote, working overtime to get Clay Helton fired.
Not surprised.
Which makes sense because it was odd timing for him to get fired losing to Stanford after all the bad that's happened with USC, how bad they've been over the years. Firing him week 2 after a loss to Stanford didn't really make as much sense as, firing him at the end of last year. But
they're going to want to hold on to Dante. That guy's a recruiting dog, and he regarded as one of the best in the country. And they might want to go the model of Oregon and get his best recruiter they can and try to find some offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator spots.
Shoot, that's the model of Alabama.
Well, I do think that's modern college football. And as you get closer and closer toward this, what we're looking at is the future of college football, maybe one giant conference or whatever else is going to be out there. I think coaching staff and recruiting, they go hand in hand. And if you have to have a recruiting coaching staff that can do it like USC can do it when they're not good, imagine what they could do when they are good. I mean, this is the kind of thing that we thought at Oregon. We always thought the recruits were going to come. The recruits were going to come. It turns out the recruits were coming when we actually bottomed out and we're on the way back up because we went out there and looked for them. There were years where Oregon wasn't even recruited. These guys talked about it. Cristobal talked about it. His dream school, Oregon. How many kids have said their dream school was Oregon? Oregon never even offered them.
Tua Tagovailoa, Mackenzie Milton. There's so many kids. As much as, the fan base wants to trash him, I think Willie Taggart was probably one of the best hires we could have made. He brought in an elite staff around him. That staff didn't go with him, thankfully, when he left. But he showed that you can recruit players to come play at Oregon. As bad as he left us and, as sour the taste was in our mouths when he left, he showed you can recruit at Oregon. And he's probably the reason Oregon's recruiting at the level they are. And he was a huge positive for the program after Mark Helfrich tore it to shreds.
Well, he helped turn the page. I mean, it was a whole new book. They had the same things entrenched for so long. They were done. They turned the page, went on to a whole new level, and we're glad they did.
Our guy Eric in the chat thinks that Oregon rotates too much. I don't know if he's talking about a particular position. He just doesn't specify it here.
I think I understand. He's talking about the offensive line. So the offensive line in week 1, we rotated 8 guys. I believe we cut that to 7 this week, but it's still a lot of guys to rotate on the offensive line. Now, I see what they're doing. They're rotating in the big guys for run fits, and they're rotating in the athletic guys when they think they're going to do some RPOs and stuff like that when they want the pocket to be able to move. It's really weird, and it's nothing I've really seen done a whole lot before. I've seen some FCS teams do it. I've never seen major FBS powers rotate that many offensive linemen, but it worked. So I can't talk too far down on it. And if he happens to be talking about rotating guys at corner, we kind of have to with the weapons Ohio State has. You're not just going to run the same corners out there outside of Mike Hill Wright the entire game. You got to, see what guys are going to perform well today, who's got the matchups, who's got the advantages. Other than that, we didn't really rotate all that much. So I'm assuming it's those 2 positions.
I think that the early on, you want to rotate as many as you can just to see what you got and give guys a chance to get their feet wet. By the end of the year, you'll have kind of different packages for different things, and you'll run with that group for the most part. But yeah, dude, I mean, I love to see the young guys play. So and you also, I feel like you have to give them that chance in recruiting. You have to say, hey, you're going to have a chance to play here and make a difference.
We appreciate these guys being here. Otherwise, we don't have an Oregon live show. So show your appreciation out there. We got Ryan Winter on the line from Sports Chat 503. And, of course, Mike Black from Fifth Quarter College Football coming off a historic Oregon win over Ohio State. And I'm right there with both of you in regards to this being the biggest Oregon win and Pac-12 win since the playoff game at the Rose Bowl against Florida State. Washington went to a playoff after that. Of course, they didn't have a monumental win in that season. They were kind of a smoke and mirrors college football playoff team to a certain extent. They lost to USC that season by a couple touchdowns. This is enormous for the Pac-12. And again, it could make up for all those other Pac-12 losses. This might ironically be a bad year for the league, where in past years, the league has taken a knock for not being good when its lower and mid-tier teams were actually pretty good. And it was a deep league. It just didn't have an elite. Now it may have an elite that can carry the banner.
Yeah, we'll just have to see how good Ohio State is for the rest of the year and try and use that. And if Oregon keeps winning out, to see how good Oregon really is. It's going to be a fun season, though. I love seeing Oregon with these big wins, and it's definitely been the most fun game since that Florida State game, too, considering I think we were all, as Oregon fans, fairly confident throughout most of the game and maybe until early in that fourth quarter, late in that fourth quarter even. But otherwise, I think I was, as a fan myself, I was pretty confident the whole way through after watching the game, and I haven't felt that way about facing a top-tier team since Florida State.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, the ability to feel comfortable in the middle of a game like that is very
great.
rare. I mean, that's very rare. And I, like you said, Mark, I thought they were going to lose it at the end. I thought that Ohio State was going to come back. They were going to do their thing. Not during the game, the whole weeks before. I thought somehow Ohio State was going to just pull this victory off. And so while the game's going on, I'm sitting there thinking, no, this is really going to happen. Ducks are up 2 touchdowns. They just got to maintain this lead. And the way that they played, especially right before halftime, I mean, they were going to tack on another score. It felt like right before halftime, had that holding penalty not brought them back. I think they were on like the 15 or 20 yard line. They were brought it all the way back to about the 45 or something. And it seemed like that killed the drive there. They got right back on it. They got the ball back in the second half. They went right back to it. And I felt very comfortable about the Oregon's chances deep into this game, possibly also because you knew that the defense was going to hold.
The only drive that scared me was, I think, to start the third quarter, we passed the ball like 4 plays in a row or 3 plays in a row when we were averaging like 7 yards per carry in the run. And obviously they were selling out for the pass in that drive, and we just kept throwing the ball. And I was like, all right, this is gonna turn into an Auburn game where we were calling the same type of stuff all get, but nope. They went back to the run after the pass didn't work, and thankfully it worked out.
I think that's Joe Moorhead. I think, he's going to try to do what he can do to move the chains. And I think sometimes guys if they get that first down incomplete pass, you can see a former quarterback who's calling the games when he just wants to get more yardage to make that third down play easier rather than go for it again. And that's what I think you were finding, in years past when we got into trouble was, there got to a point where you just couldn't get the chains moved. And I think college football is such a game of momentum. It's just, if you just move the chains 1 or 2 times in a possession, that can change your entire quarter almost, just flipping the field alone. And I think Oregon did a really good job of both those things. They punted well. They pushed them back when they needed to, and they forced the action.
So, Mark, I have a question for you because, I feel like it's really silly as a Oregon fan, but I know you have been doing your show, so you haven't been all over social media. After Helton's firing, Mario Cristobal is coming up a whole lot amongst media members. Can you let non-Oregon fans know that he's not going to USC?
I can't see it happening. I don't know that USC, with all their tradition and prestige and location and brand and everything, I think there's a reason why there have been a lot of top-notch coaches rumored to go there, like Urban Meyer and James Franklin and others, but have not seriously considered it because I don't know that they've shown enough commitment to football
or competency.
Yeah, and competency, exactly, within the athletic department to give somebody who's really serious and knows the inner workings of an institution and a football program like a Mario Cristobal, certainly like an Urban Meyer and some other ones that they wanted that wanted no part of it because they didn't see the commitment and the competency to get the job done at the level that it needs to be done. So Mario Cristobal is in a perfect position where he is right now. He's going to have to be just overwhelmed with not just money, but also a selling job that we're going to do this the right way and we're going to give you what you need to get it done.
I think this is like a layup for USC, and they're still going to mess it up and hire somebody not named Dante Williams.
Oh yeah,
which is it's gonna be such a bad idea because after being the interim for the rest of the season, if they don't hire Dante Williams, he's not staying at USC. If he's been the interim head coach for the University of Southern California all year, someone's gonna give him a head coaching job if they start winning some of these games, which they will. They're a talented team. They tend to pick up some momentum towards the end of the year too. They lost early 2019, picked up some steam towards the end of the year, won the Pac-12 South. They're going to win games later on, and he's going to get a job if they don't hire him. And they're going to fumble the easiest transition they could make.
Well, they're always trying to win the press conference, right? To win the first day, to get the media on board. And in LA, you got to have a big name. You got to have. I mean, I would think that there are some people in USC right now who think they can get Pete Carroll back. I mean, there's a disconnect. And I think that some of these schools that have these really high expectations, but haven't seen any real consistency in their program. Schools like Nebraska, maybe Washington's falling into this situation right now as well. But these schools that have been good in the past, they think they are always going to be good. It's a rude awakening. All you need is a couple, 2 years of not winning, and you can find yourself irrelevant quickly. Now, that's not going to happen to USC. USC will maintain its media dominance and everything else. But you're right, Mike. They're going to probably screw this thing up. I'm looking at the names. James Franklin, Matt Campbell, Greg Schiano, okay, PJ Fleck. You're going to row the boat into
Dante Williams is right there.
He's right there. And if you follow the blueprint, you go and you get two guys off the scrap heap to run your defense or your offense. There's plenty of guys that would be willing to go there. Yeah. And you keep the dog recruiter in line. You keep all these families happy who already came there because of him. They didn't go there because of Helton.
Let's pretend Saban retired and Mario went there today. Dante Williams is who I hope would be the first call for Oregon.
Dante Williams is a great fit here. I think that the game has shifted. Great hire. I think the game has shifted so much toward accommodating these young kids and young families and having these families with very high expectations trying to get to the league or anything else that they have out there. You have to have a recruiter. You have to have somebody there who's going to be able to talk to those families and get those kids on board. I don't care what your football expertise is. Yes, you have to be savvy enough to run the program, but you need somebody who's going to get players in the door. And I think USC with Dante Williams at the helm would be that team. They would continue their dominance in recruiting, and you find somebody to run their offense. Heck, you get guys come off the NFL to run your offense. Cliff Kingsbury. Not a problem. Yeah.
I think we also need to understand, though, that whether it's generated by the media or generated by social media, fans on social media, that sometimes the list that comes out of names is just the typical suspects, the typical candidates, plus depending on what region or what conference you're in, that gets tweaked a little bit, but maybe that's not necessarily what USC is looking at.
Cristobal's been tied to South Carolina, Auburn, and USC.
Right.
And I don't think maybe Auburn would have been the only one that got even a blink, but I thought that was to get a raise too. So yeah, what gets released out there isn't always very accurate.
And I would also say with the Dante Williams hire is they might not go that direction because that's how they got Helton. So they by kind of bringing everybody up through and keeping it in house or whatever, they might go a completely different direction. And they're going to hire the search firm first. That's the easiest money of the whole books. Am I right there, Mark? The search firm, they make their money early.
Man,
yep.
I think the best three hires any team can make right now who needs a head coach, if they're not able to pull a big name from another school, is going to be Dante Williams at USC, Glenn Schumann at Georgia, or Jonathan Smith at Oregon State. Those are my three favorite coaches to bring on for a good job if you can't pull a big name.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of a guy who would be phenomenal and they would never pull the trigger on it because he doesn't have the name. Is Jonathan Smith. That's a guy who's from the West Coast, understands the deal, has prominence, has connections. No, they'd want to go get Chris Peterson, a guy who ejected because he wanted more mental health. And now he's in front of the booth. Now what's he going to do? Go take the pressure cooker that's USC? Yeah, right.
He couldn't handle Washington. Wants to go to USC.
The guy drove in to work on a boat at Washington. The guy lived on the lake and drove in on a boat. Okay. If he couldn't handle the pressure of that, how's he going to do LA traffic?
Yeah, it's crazy. They always seem to, lately at least, make the wrong choices, and
Well,
you got to
and then
start
there's-
thinking it's more on this administration than it was maybe
Sure.
even on Helton. Maybe
Yeah.
Helton was handcuffed.
Oh, sure. But there's always that group of fans that think they can get anybody, let's go get Saban right now.
I would
He'd want to come
laugh.
over here.
I'd
When the
laugh if
Duck
they
fans,
hired Chip
before they
Kelly.
hired Dana Altman as their basketball coach, they were Duck fans that said they wanted to get Phil Jackson. Hey, seriously.
You want to
I
run
was
the
like,
triangle in college?
Sure. Phil would love to come to Eugene. Yeah. Unreal.
Yeah, watch they end up hiring like Chip Kelly or Willie Taggart.
Well, that's an interesting one, Chip Kelly, because he proves
He's got the
over there.
name.
Yeah, he's right. He's close. He doesn't have to move. No, I think you're right. I think they're going to go with some sort of a splash hire. I think they're going to try to get maybe a former retired coach, something like a Bob Stoops or somebody who's been out of the game a little bit.
Bob Stoops.
Who knows? I just think they're going to go for the name brand, the cachet. They're not going to go with the actual real good hire, which would be probably a guy in his 40s who isn't very well known, who is very well known inside of the football community, but might not be well known in the LA Times community. And I think they're going to try to run with it and go with the big name hire.
Mark, if you had to guess, who do they go grab if it's a big name?
Well, I was going to say that in about 15 minutes here, we're going to have a call-in show on the main channel there
Nice.
at the Voice of College Football, and I'll be talking this, I'm sure, for the next couple hours. But see, Ryan hit on exactly the route that I recommend every time one of these big jobs opens up. It's not going through the retreads unless you can hit the
Jackpot.
ridiculous jackpot
Right.
Urban Meyer type hire. Yeah, you got to have a selection committee and people that are good enough to recognize talent and recognize ability enough to get the next Matt Campbell type coach, the guy that's got a group of 5 job right now, or who's a coordinator somewhere that is just that sharp in their 40s, somebody on the ascent, not a retread.
Can we count Oregon State as a group of 5 job?
Not
I think-
technically.
I think Jonathan Smith's at his final destination. I don't think he has the desire to go anywhere. I think he wants to build a program in Corvallis. I think he's very happy there. I think he wants to raise his family there. I don't think he's going anywhere. And I think the Bees lucked out by doing that.
I think he could build a good program there too over time.
I
It's going to
think
take
so.
a while for sure.
It'll be a
But-
little bit.
That team's never been as talented as they are now.
In the North right now, it would be hard pressed to say they're not probably the 3rd best team. It looks like Stanford's in the top, maybe 2 or 3. Oregon obviously the top. But if you're doing power rankings, I think the Beavs are above both Washington schools and probably above Cal.
That's crazy. It's 2001.
It is crazy,
It's 2001 all over again.
but it's good
All
for
right,
them
gentlemen.
because again, I think that their blueprint is build from the line and go out. Same thing as Oregon. So.
Another Oregon live show in the books. My thanks, as always, to Mike Black, 5th Quarter College Football, Ryan Winter, Sports Chat 503. Check him out on Twitter, and Sports Chat 503 is right here on YouTube. So you can go right to the search bar, look it up, see what Ryan's got in store.
Yeah, buddy. Thank you so much, Mark. Voice of College
Appreciate it.
Football. You're the best.
Thanks for having us, Mark.
Thanks so much.